Hey, Spuddies, Potato McWhiskey here, and today I'm going to be talking to you about Untold. The game is set to be going into a technical beta in late summer, and if you sign up for the Insider program at the History Untold website, you can sign up and get access to that. I don't know how they're going to select people. If it's anything like Age of Empires 4 betas, which is kind of how Microsoft does things like for Age of Empires, there's probably going to be a lot of people let in. And actually, there will be like a Microsoft forum where you can actually have direct contact with the developers. I think that might have an impact on the game. That's interesting to me. But Untold, it's an interesting game. Let's watch the trailer and then we'll talk about it a little bit. So I'll just play you the trailer.
History is filled with moments of greatness. Some well-known, some lost to time. But what about the history that could have been if you were its architect? How would you reshape the world? What new stories would you tell? And when your people speak, would you listen? How would you lead them in this new world? History is filled with moments of greatness, but these will be yours.
I think that is an interesting trailer, to say the least. It has piqued my curiosity. There's kind of a little bit of there's a lot of things I want to talk about here. Xbox Game Studios presents. I'm more interested in the new turn-based strategy game from the creators that revolutionized the genre. Now, this is a little bit cynical, maybe perhaps on my part, or even on perhaps the half of the people who made this trailer. Now, you might read that and you'll think, oh, okay, these guys, they revolutionized the genre. Their claim to fame is that some of the people who work at Oxide Games were developers on Civilization 5, which I would argue is a game that revolutionized the 4X genre. It basically entrenched hexagons and 1 unit per tile in many, many games. But I think I want to talk about this point for a little moment, because it's kind of one of those things where it's one of those little weird things that kind of gets at me and kind of bothers me. I'm like, hey, listen, the best example I can come up with, if you guys remember Turtle Rock Studios, I think it was, they made Left 4 Dead with Valve, and then they went on to make their own game that kind of sucked, just a little, wasn't very good. And I think they leaned heavily into the idea that, we were the Left 4 Dead guys. We're making the follow-up to Left 4 Dead. We're making this is the new age. And the reality is that games are made by a team. You can't take like 5-6 people out of a team of 40 to 50 people inside an institution that has institutional knowledge like Firaxis Games and say that these guys are the creators. I understand. Look, I know it's just a marketing thing, right? But I'm sitting here because the way I engage with media is maybe a little bit different because I'm super into it. And I'm like, you guys, were you really the creator? You worked on it, sure. But were you the creators? You know what I mean? I think, I don't know, maybe that's a little bit cynical of me. And I do hate to be negative when I look at games and I talk about games. You'll notice I tend to try to avoid negativity. But this little thing, that kind of annoyed me. Now, that said, these are very accomplished developers and they did work on Civilization 5 and they're all very, very good at the stuff they've done. In fact, they've worked on many games that I like, including things like Battle for Middle-earth, Civ 5, and there was a couple of other ones. I did a little bit of research. I didn't do a huge amount, but this was just a point. I think we need to ask the games industry to step away from this kind of greatest hits, callback marketing. If your game is good, let me know. I know it works because it gets people interested. Like, oh, I like Civ 5 and I like this game. Anyway, look. Okay. Pet peeve aside, this was a really cool trailer. If you want to see the trailer for yourself, it will be linked in the description. Now, there's a few kind of key moments I want to talk about here. The quality isn't great here, but interestingly, let me go ahead and mute this. But has anyone noticed that it is snowing in the pyramids? This seems to be telling a very clear thing about what this game is. I don't think this is going to be a linear game. I don't think this is going to be a game where you go from the Bronze Age to the Stone Age, or where you go from the Stone Age to the Bronze Age, to the Iron Age, to the Industrial Age, blah, 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 blah. I think it's going to be very non-linear. It's going to be very mix and match. Things are going to be in places and where things don't make sense, but you're basically going to reassembling history in a very distorted way. I don't think this game is... I think this game is going to subvert expectations, and there are many reasons I believe that, but one of them is the fact that we have a snowy pyramids in here, and that the person on top of it, it was a, I think, is this like traditional Egyptian garb? I don't know. There was something in here that told me that, like, that gave me another hint at that. But then we move on to a sort of semi-modern era, but check this out. These guys are in like Victorian era clothing, but this person is in slightly more different clothing. But we have skyscrapers, and we have what look like very, very modern skyscrapers in the background, and very different like building and art styles, and clothing and all that sort of stuff. I wish I could get the quality to be higher. God, YouTube videos are actually just trash. I wish I should have just downloaded this video or I found the trailer. And then we have a transition to a more Greco-Roman style. And yet here's Stonehenge and Benjamin Franklin doing the old kite in the sky with lightning thing, and he's accompanied by what looks to be a Korean. I can't tell if that's Korean, like prince or something. I don't know. Yeah. Could you see why I'm starting to have that vibe that this game is going to be non-linear time? Like you're going to be building the Stonehenge in the industrial era, where there's going to be things and anachronisms in this game that don't make sense, and that the structure of history is more going to be a little bit more fluid than it is linear. Like we have airships. Now, this screen here actually showed some interesting work. If we go back just far enough, you could see power plant stacks. I would say this is honestly one of the worst screens in terms of art for the whole trailer, and yet it reveals a lot of information. We have like power plants, we have what looks to me like roadworks and all that kind of stuff. A very, very beautiful thing, although the backdrop itself looks like it was a little bit rushed compared to the frontline parts. And now we're into what looks like, I'm seeing like St. Peter's Basilica or whatever that place in the Russia is called. We've also got like a biodome around a Colosseum. Are you seeing this? We've got drones carrying horse heads. These people don't look like they're dressed in particularly modern clothing. It looks like almost Renaissance-y kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Like, are you seeing this? This looks super weird and super interesting. Like, here's a person in like heavy armor throwing a spear, hanging out with I can't tell what this is, but this person looks like they're wearing no clothing essentially. Now, is that what we can draw from a trailer? Is that what that trailer is telling us? Because we're seeing, you know, a Shakespearean person with what looks like Roman, Greek kind of age person. Is that what it's really telling us? Is it really telling us that the game is going to be non-linear and things aren't going to line up exactly how we expect them to? Probably not. It's probably just a trailer, right? It's just telling you about the story of what the game is going to be about. But that's kind of my hunch. That's my hunch. Maybe I'm wrong, okay? Maybe I'm wrong. Now, that's not all that we have to speculate on, because we do, in fact, have some screenshots of the game, and you can kind of see more of these kind of things that I was talking about. You could see over here we have a pyramids, you could see over here we have the Chichen Itza, you could see here we have some kind of gatehouse, and we have walls and all that kind of stuff. We also have some kind of Zoroastrian pyre, or perhaps a scouting tower. We have what looks like a governor's palace in the center of the city. We have organically laid out roads and all kinds of things of that nature. Very, very interesting. And my first impression of this art style is that I don't love it. I don't hate it, I just don't love it. I think it's fine. It's a particular. I have very much so on the Civ 6 art style train, where I want things to look aesthetic, but there are some really interesting notes here. Look, these are thatched roof homes right next to what look like fairly modern homes with like pavilions and stuff like that. There are some interesting anachronisms that we can gather from this. So you can start to see I'm building a case for why I don't think this game is necessarily going to be perfectly linear in time when it comes to advancing through the eras. Here is another screenshot, and this one looks kind of familiar to a lot of things that we've seen here. We have some sort of forum building surrounded by housing. We have, I can't really tell what that is. If I zoom in on it a lot, I kind of lose detail. It almost looks like something that could be maybe horse racing related, or maybe a barracks. We have what very clearly looks like the bar garden of like the hanging gardens, perhaps something hanging gardens ish. And then over here, it's kind of hard to make this out, but it almost looks like I'm seeing like a smokestack here, and I'm seeing like wagons and like lines of stuff. It could be like a horse station of some kind. But this screenshot I quite like. I mean, they look reasonably good. Here's another very interesting screenshot. We have, of course, a Colosseum type building right next to, I don't know the name of that, but it looks like a Chinese or Japanese bastion, like the Barbican of the Sun maybe, or something like that. And we can also see, look, some sort of fountain area. We've got the governor's palace again. I think this object right here will be the city center, the governor's palace. And I would expect this to get bigger and more impressive as the game goes on. We've also got some kind of buildings. And it's I feel like it's very obvious to tell which buildings are important, because you could see like roads and they have like a bunch of small buildings next to them. And then you have stuff like this, stuff that really stands out, stuff like this that really stands out. And then you've got another building over here that seems to stand out. You've also got this kind of Japanese temple as well. So it's a very much so a big mishmash. I think this game is going to be similar to Humankind in that you're going to see a little bit more anachronism, a little more combination of cultures and ideas sort of blending together to create an alternate view of history, which is an interesting concept. I think Humankind did a good job of pulling it off. And I'm curious to see how these guys will do it. Now, this is one of the very interesting screenshots because we have a lot to talk about here, okay? We've got a horse resource, we've got some kind of farm here, we've got this forum with an actual icon here. It looks like worker icons dictating how many people are working it. We've got an actual forum thing again, a different kind of forum. So perhaps this one is for entertainment and this one is for politics. It kind of, I'm getting that vibe because this one actually has seating around it and looks like actually a stage. So that's kind of the vibe that I'm getting from a few of these things. But this notably looks like it's outside of the city center, because I would assume that walls would be protecting the city center here. And there's also a lot here to talk about the UI, but I like the idea of perhaps there being a farm inside the city is kind of odd, you know, because I would expect farms to either be like integrated with the housing. Like if there was a farm in this area, I would expect like any place that wasn't taken up by a house, there would be like little organically generated chunks of farms going around. Whereas this feels very rigid, so this kind of maybe feels like it's some sort of strategic resource in the same way that horses are a strategic resource. And my estimation here is that there does seem to be like a sickle icon here. It looks a little bit like a question mark. There's a sickle and then a 1 with a production number. So it looks like it produces 1 horse every whatever interval of time for this bar filling up. And it's got 2 workers. I assume those are worker icons. We're making a few assumptions about the UI, but we're figuring it all out. Now I want to point you over to here, this score number up at the top, and also this wreath that seems to be filling up. I'm going to imagine that this is similar to Humankind's fame thing, and you eventually fill this up for some goal. Perhaps this is your ranking, perhaps this is your progression through the acts and the eras. Now, we've also got a few interesting things here. You've got your population, and interestingly, population seems to be a global number that you care about. I'm not sure why you would care about your population on a global number unless there is some way that you interact with that population. But we're also seeing food, gold, wood, and stone up here too as part of the UI, all having their own differing amounts of income coming in. As well as science that we're very clearly seeing here, and research on horse color. So one thing that I would possibly guess about this game is that these are the ancient / classical / antiquity era resources, and in fact this will expand as time goes on for things like iron, for things like coal, for things like oil, and perhaps even uranium. We might even see these kind of resources like steel. I would expect to see iron, I would expect to see coal, I would expect to see maybe oil, I don't know, maybe oil and gas, and then finally uranium as your strategic resources as game goes on. Perhaps even stone eventually becomes concrete. I would expect to see these resources morph over time. I would be very surprised if we saw just these few same resources here. Now, we've also got a bunch of flags here that we can talk about, and I think I can interpret these. This looks like diplomacy. This looks like military management. This looks like city management, or perhaps government management. This looks like Either of these could be religion, honestly, but it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell. But these could either be religion or like your population's culture, and then this is obviously a help menu. So there's kind of some interesting stuff down here. Now we've also got this eyeball here. This is probably like a UI remover or perhaps a map mode button. And then this, I have no idea what that could be. It's probably like an options menu. But over here, over by the science portion of the screen, we have a indicator for how long a technology is going to take. In this case, horse color is taking 2 turns at 85 science per turn. Although, don't take these numbers into consideration. We've also got some important events, construction. This looks like perhaps military production. We've got trade. We've got art. Alliances, maybe. These all these things might have consequences for your gameplay. And then we have this indicator down here, which I think is related to this era and antiquities thing. And the interesting thing here is it says Act 1, Era, the Antiquities. So perhaps there are particular events that actually advance you along these notches rather than a smooth progression along. But that is something we will have to consider. We've also got an indicator here, which I would assume matches this indicator up here. So perhaps a diplomatic proposal has been sent to you, or there is something that it requires your attention. And similarly here, there's a diplomatic proposal. There's like some kind of alert that you need to be paying attention to. It all looks very standard 4X UI kind of stuff. I'm not seeing anything here that really surprises me, except maybe just the variety and number of icons. So that is probably giving you an idea of perhaps the depth and number of actions you can take in the game. Do take all of this with a pinch of salt. This is obviously pre-alpha footage or pre-alpha imagery. Now this is a screen that really interests me. So if I take a moment here, there's actually a lot I want to talk about. We see a lot of the same stuff that we've seen in the UI. We've got a population number, we've got science, we got food, we got gold, we got wood, we got stone. However, we are seeing here that we are in the Iron Age, 2600 BCE, which is earlier than 1742 BCE. So maybe I was wrong about linear time or non-linear time. Perhaps things are a little bit more linear than I put out, but this is my theory. I think the game isn't going to be treating time as perfectly linear. Perhaps there are ways to do things ahead of time or behind time than you would normally expect. Now, I think just to broadly describe what you're seeing here, you're seeing a 3-way war, or at least a war between one player and 2 others. The green player here in the center owns the city of Mamprusi and Empangeni, which I don't know what cultures these cities represent. Hang on, let me Google that real quick. Mamprusi is northern Ghana and Togo, and Empangeni is South African. And Lipetsk looks like it is from Russia. Interesting. So there's kind of, a little bit of a cultural mishmash. There's a lot of stuff going on here. Now, there is a lot of interesting things I want to talk about this game. So like I was saying, the green player, who is represented by this horn icon, everywhere you see this icon is their units, is attacking into the city of Ashanti, who is owned by yellow, and he's using siege weaponry plus some sort of army stack here, and this seems to be representing either how many troops are in the army, or how strong the army is, and this is seems to be representing the quality of the army, like the tech level or how powerful the army is. Perhaps it is just a second order indicator for this number, because if you can see down here, these guys are over 500, whereas these guys here are under 500 and they have 4 stars. So perhaps that is what that represents. Then again, right, we have these guys that are 309 and these guys that are 300, and these guys are 2 stars bigger than these guys. So I think this might reference some sort of quality level of the troops that you're seeing here. But it looks like we do indeed have horsemen. We have regular infantry, regular infantry, regular infantry. And then what looks like to be here, these look like builders to me, and yet they have this huge power level. So perhaps these are builders and these are not, but this looks like either a scout or a builder patrol. Maybe that's a spear that they have, but it almost looks like a log that they use to build. I don't know, it's hard to tell. But these are very clearly archers that are putting the city under siege. And I also, so there's kind of a lot going on here. So it looks like the green player is attacking, or rather is attacking in the north and then defending in the south against a couple of incursions. Now, there isn't really any hints as to how these units are attacking each other, but I do see an indicator here, a number 3, which might indicate how many units are in each stack. And it looks like these two units are actually in conflict, but this one looks like maybe it's routing or something. It's hard to tell. Or maybe this is just the indicator when there's only one unit there. I don't know why you wouldn't just put a 1 there. But we could see that each city has its population number, each city has a happiness, and there's also varieties of infrastructure here. And interestingly is the shape of the tiles. The shapes of the tiles are not perfect hexagons, but they are still hexagons. If you look carefully, they all have 6 sides thereabouts, with the exception of when they're next to water. When they are, well, this one has, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So like there are some oddly shaped tiles in this game, which is kind of an interesting idea. One thing I do notice that is incredibly lacking from these cities is, where are the farms? Where is the food infrastructure to actually support this? I see this player has surplus food, and yet I see no food infrastructure inside these cities. I do see pyramids. I do see, it looks like you can build multiple buildings inside a single tile. And this actually kind of calls back to an idea I talked about, I want to say in a video many, many years ago, where I thought it would be interesting if you treated each individual triangle of a city as a place where you could build things. So you could build, like most of these should have, you know, different tiles will have different numbering things. But if you have a 6-sided, like if you have a hexagon is made up of 6 triangles, essentially, is what I'm trying to say. And so you could build like sub things in the sub triangles. I thought that would be an interesting and neat idea. And it looks like they've kind of gone for something along those lines, right? There seems to be something built in each of these little quadrants that are coming out from the city. You can see how the city spaces them out, and then you'll notice there's a piece of infrastructure inside each quadrant. So this is kind of, I like it when developers are speaking the same language as me when I think about 4X games. One of the things that was really cool about Old World, when I was talking about that game, is for a couple of years I had been banging on about, like, dude, we need to deal with the fact that as you get towards the late game of a 4X game, the number of actions you have to take increases massively, and the meaningfulness of each of those actions goes down massively. And Old World sort of put a little bit of a shoe or a spanner in the works with the orders mechanic, limiting the total number of actions you can take per turn. And so now it becomes, well, which actions are really important for me to do this turn? And I think this game is doing a similar thing, but for infrastructure in sub tiles. This is something I've actually kind of dreamt about and talked. I think I've talked about it in a few videos, but it was revealed to me in a dream that we would see a game like this, and I'm very glad to see it. Now, one interesting thing I'm noticing is that there are a ton of differing markers. Let me zoom in here. You can see there is like a shape like this, and then a shape like this, and they both have different numbers in them. And I'm wondering if perhaps this is indicating how many workers you have working in it, or perhaps how many pieces of infrastructure you have in this as well. And it looks like that could be it. It's hard to tell exactly, but there's a lot of like interesting things here. I'm seeing like the Hanging Gardens, I'm seeing the Colosseum, I'm seeing the pyramids. I'm not seeing a whole lot of bonus infrastructure in the enemy's territory. But the run really, I think I'm in two minds of the art style of the game. On the one hand, I really like the higgledy-piggledy sort of like organic look to the roads, where they connect together and they kind of form a little bit of an organic style. But I look at this area here and I'm like, why doesn't this road just connect like that and connect like that? You know, it feels like they're a little bit too, the organicness of each individual tile is constrained to each individual tile, and they're not really building out that organic feel to surrounding tiles. So I feel like I'm like, if I were to look at an individual chunk, they feel a little bit disconnected, is what I'm saying. The only connection are the major ones. And like, why are we building like this big old road to the coast? Like, I feel like if a road is going to a populated tile, it should be of a higher rank. Whereas if a road is going to a piece of ocean, it would maybe be a less important road, unless there is a port here. So I feel like they do have a little bit of work to do on making these connectors feel organic, especially because it's like, why is this road here? I mean, it's obvious the way they've programmed it, right? You get a central point and then it connects to the center point of every connected tile. So you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tiles are connected to this. So you get 7 roads. But like, does this city really need to connect to this random piece of ocean? Perhaps I'd like to see maybe a little bit of work on that See that get tightened up. But, you know, of course, it is pre-alpha footage, so they're probably still, you know, testing the limits of a lot of these things. Now, here's another interesting screenshot. We do see the governor's palace once again, but we also see this pagoda style thing, and it has two workers in it, is what I assume it is. And then this, if we zoom in on this, this is very clearly some kind of campfire. So maybe this is less religious and more defense tower oriented. Maybe this gives you like extra vision range on the city. Maybe it, I don't know, adds to the defensiveness of your walls. We also see this again, and this looks like some sort of political building. We have some central podium. It doesn't look like it's for entertainment. It looks more like a government building, like you file in, you find your seat, someone gets up on top and starts making a speech. So this, to me, looks a little bit more, not necessarily a public forum, but perhaps more like a government plaza, something of that nature, which kind of intrigues me. And again, we are still seeing, by the way, you know, thatched crap roofs with these more modern, nice looking houses. Now, this could potentially represent the quality of life of the people in your cities. Also, bonus meme, hello coal. What looks like coal to me, maybe coal is represented as a strategic resource and is not actually added to this pool, who knows. But I do see a little chunk of coal, and that looks like a coal mine, and it looks like it's being worked, although it's locked. I'm not sure about that. Maybe that means it's not unlocked yet. I'm less certain that these are like worker symbols now, and perhaps it means something else. But I feel like it makes sense that they're worker symbols, because like this one has none. You know what I mean? Maybe. It's hard to tell. But there isn't like anything particularly new in this screenshot, other than we've got like a select new technology screen. We have some very obvious alerts here. This looks like a placeholder. It looks like it's referencing a farm or a pasture. Pasture needs a update. Here is another screenshot. We've got the pyramid, and we have what looks like, I can't quite tell what that is, but it almost looks like some kind of like transportation building, like you move people around, like a Pony Express type thing. But if we look at the houses, we've got sort of old shanty style houses next to these more modern style houses again. What looks to be perhaps a lumber mill or a mine. You could see a mine cart or perhaps a lumber cart there. It's hard to exactly tell. Some kind of tent next to it. And there's just like a, you know, so I'm not sure. Maybe this is like a worker symbol, but unsure what these mean. But my assumption right now is that this is some kind of, you're putting population into it, or maybe it's activated or prioritized in some way. Kind of curious, uncertain, or unknown what exactly all of this information represents. Now, here is a fun modern screenshot. I think we can very clearly see a broadcast tower here, front and center. So this is definitely a late game building that you build. It's also got its own small infrastructure. So this has to be some kind of radio technology. We've also got what looks like a research campus here. It's got two domes and kind of an interesting wing. I think this could be like either a research or military building. There's like a lot of buildings that stand out, because like you have like these crappy, well, I want to say crappy, but these kind of like generic, like, oh, look, it's a skyscraper, yada, yada, yada. But then there are things that stand out, like this building here with the H on top. This is very clearly a hospital. And then this is like its own building, and then this is a building, and then something is very clearly under construction in this area too. We're also seeing that this person is gaining +1 of whatever this point is, and this looks like a German imperial flag. They are researching brewing, which is kind of an interesting thing to do. And it looks like brewing is a part of some kind of timeline. Maybe this is like part of your goals in the act, in the era, but this is the atomic age. So maybe the game is more linear than I thought. Maybe my original theory is gone. We're kind of learning in real time as I react to this. And here is the final screenshot that I have for you. We have a little bit of water towerage going on here, so that could be unique infrastructure. I do see a couple of them in the background, so maybe this is just generic infrastructure representing the time. We're still in the atomic age, but the buildings are notably shorter, so perhaps this is a suburb. We are again seeing a hospital, perhaps from earlier in the game or from a different angle. We're also seeing some kind of power plant. These cooling towers are usually associated with nuclear power, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a nuclear power plant, although it could be. I'm also seeing a building here with what looks like solar panels on the roof. So this does look like a very advanced late game kind of city. And of course, there we are. Look, we see a power symbol. We see food has changed. We see gold has changed. We see wood has changed. If we go back to some of these earlier screenshots, they were represented by different symbols. I hope you can see that there. This is like cheese, and this is gold coins. This is like lumber, and then this is bricks. And then this, I would assume, is maybe concrete or stone. This is lumber, gold. So it looks like things do change, and even your science beakers change as time goes on. So there's a lot in this game that we might have to unpack. So it looks like maybe just energy is the item, which is kind of weird that you're generating no energy when you clearly have like a nuclear power plant of some kind or a power plant of some kind. Plus, you also have this building that looks like it might have solar on the roof, although those could be skylights. We also have some kind of governmental garden-based building. This could maybe be like a small school or a college or something. There's a lot going on in all these screenshots, and it has me quite excited for the game. There's a lot to unpack, in my opinion. We've also got the nice little website here to check out. Of course, if you want to become an insider, go check out arahistoryuntold.com. And they want to explore a living world. The developers talked about a few different things, that they want to have the world feel dynamic, and the world will change over time. I'll put footage in if I can find it of the cities kind of building themselves, where they, the roads sprawl out and the buildings get built, and over time your city will organically build up. And the interesting thing here is it looks like you are going to be playing an immortal ruler. You are going to be playing as the Egyptians or the Greeks or the United States for an entire game. And they want to have you essentially customize your own nation. You can build things like citadels, cathedrals. You can make strategic bonuses. You can research a whole bunch of technologies with resources, improvement, goods, and equipment. And the win condition of the game seems to be unrelated to some sort of specific achievement. Rather, it seems to be they're going for a humankind approach where you win the game by pushing through to a victory by doing a set of uniquely interesting and important things throughout the whole game. So it's like a continuous assessment of your performance. But yeah, that's my take on Ara History Untold. A little bit of an off-the-cuff video. I didn't have the time to really sit down and edit a good video, so I did it as a presentation style. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to support the channel, please do consider becoming a member of the channel or getting YouTube Premium, because that's how I make my money. I love you all very, very much, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.